First question I want to hit. We got one in from Dan Nichols, who, so the subject line of this email went from 0 to 100 right away. I'm going to modify it a little bit for our purposes. The subject title of this email was, "Why has Aaron Glenn not been fired?" Essentially pointing out that since week 7, the Lions defense has been bottom 3 in the league, and it's clear teams are carving them up in the pass game. Running quarterbacks especially gash this defense. His scheme seems completely incapable of playing at this point. Why has he not been fired yet? Now, we at the PFF NFL podcast don't like to call for people's jobs. So instead, let's simply focus on why this Lions defense is underachieving, and is it problematic to the point that it's going to undermine their entire season?
I have a couple thoughts here. I think the first for me, and maybe I should do some more research on this, but it kind of just, I guess, a belief. I do think more so on defense than offense, you need the horses. Like, you can have a great scheme, you can do different things, get creative. I guess Brian Flores is a phenomenal example of coaching around a deficiency in talent, and it's in the same division. So I guess there's a counter example. But nevertheless, like, I would say, look at the guys that have developed on this defense. Even a second overall pick in Aiden Hutchinson, I get he's a second overall pick, but his leap has been obvious. Ali McNeil, unfortunately now on IR, is I think a budding star on the interior, former third-round pick. You look at a guy like Kirby Joseph, and when he steps in with Tracy Walker, he takes a leap. Like, there are so many players, Jerry Jacobs, the undrafted corner, where Malcolm Rodriguez, I know he's now more of a fullback, but there are so many guys you can point to as later round guys or cheaper free agents. Really bringing in Alex Anzalone has a career resurgence back in Detroit. They obviously shared some time in New Orleans. So, like, I get the question. I actually tweeted out yesterday. Yeah, they're 29th in EPA per play allowed, 30th in success rate allowed since that week 7, half of their season split. I just think, they just still have a talent deficiency there. Outside of McNeil and Hutchinson, no one in the front 7 is a difference-making player. Now, I'm going to piss off Lions fans. Maybe that's why you don't use your first round picks on a running back and an off-ball linebacker, when Jalen Carter or Christian Gonzalez could have been your 2 picks. I think if you did that, you'd have an awesome defense. So anyway, I get the question. I do. And Glenn has had some issues, but he's also, his first couple of years there, they played a ton of man. They didn't have the guys to do it. They Jeffrey Okudah in a blender. And I have seen him kind of change things and do things differently. I'm still a believer in Aaron Glenn, but I do get the question.
I think for defense as well, if it's not a star player, we tend to very easily ignore injuries or just put them out of mind. And look, everybody gets injuries. It's part of the gig, but you have to factor in what it does to the defense, right? Like, if you bring in a bunch of players, if you don't have an incredible level of depth, which you need for a really top-level defense, and you get a bunch of significant starters get hurt, the defense is going to get worse. It just is, right? No matter what scheme you're running, it's almost impossible to withstand a certain volume of injuries hitting this defense. So we credited Detroit in the offseason for some of the moves they made, going and getting a bunch of veteran guys that can man the secondary and sort of prop up that level and say, we have at least a baseline of solid play here. And half of those guys are hurt now, right? And Alex Anzalone, as you said, has had a great season so far. He's hurt. Ellen McNeil is hurt. Like, everybody of consequence except Aiden Hutchinson is getting hurt at various points. So it's not the defense that it started off being. And it started off really good. Now, maybe they were overachieving for the first part of the season, and now they're underachieving for the second half. But I think you have to factor in some of the injuries that they've been dealing with this whole process. Now, part of the job of coaching is to figure out a way around that and put the guys that you do have in the best position to succeed. But I just think when we have these conversations, we have to at least acknowledge the players that they've been missing, and critical parts of this defense are not there.
100%. I mean, you lose Chauncey Gardner-Johnson right away, and frankly, been able to fill in with a Brian Branch who's been awesome. The Emmanuel Mosley one was huge. Like, I do like Jerry Jacobs, but you went out and signed him for a reason, and I think it was a great value deal too, getting him off the injury. I thought he was playing great ball before then. The last one for me that actually spins positive, because the quote, if I remember correctly, from Dan Campbell was, James Houston could be back in December. That was the timeline we heard. Was it was going to take a long time. Yeah, obviously he's been out, pretty much the entire season. But December was the beginning of what they thought could be the window. And look, is he a rotational guy? Sure, but they have no pass rush outside of Aiden Hutchinson. Lee McNeil, sure, for what he does as a kind of a 0-1 tech type player, is obviously great at that. But a true, like, pin your ears back, get it for the quarterback type guy outside of Hutchinson, there's been nobody. Maybe James Houston steps in, starts playing like the guy he was last year, and it makes a big difference, because that, I think, has been, as much as the coverage unit has the injuries, I think it also just, like, they don't get any coverage pressure or coverage sacks, because guys aren't getting, or sorry, inverse. Like, they don't get any quick pressure, because it's really just Aiden working by himself, and now teams are chipping him like crazy, doubling him. Like, he gets no one-on-one rushes anymore after his hot start.
Yeah, we have this kind of not a chicken and the egg situation, but like, which is it more at fault here? Is it missing repeatedly on talent acquisition, or is it a scheme that isn't actually getting the best out of the talent that they've acquired? Like, Aiden Hutchinson obviously is emerging as a true superstar as an edge rusher, the number 2 overall pick, a guy that should have gone number 1 overall in that draft. So that's the one hit. But outside of that, and Bryant Branch, I guess, this year is looking like he's going to be a star as well. But every other defensive pick they've made in the last several years has not panned out yet, right? You look at across the board, Lim McNeil is starting to play really well, but as you say, as a nose tackle that can get some pressure, there's a kind of limited impact he can have on the pass game. But Levi Onwuzurike hasn't done anything. The Okwaras are not making an impact. Josh Paschal, Charles Harris, who they acquired, like the corners, whether it was Jeffrey Okuda, who they got rid of, whether it's Melifonwu, like a whole bunch of guys that they brought in as part of this rebuild have not been the kind of impact or contributing players that they thought they would be, which is why they had to go back to free agency and bring in, guys like Cameron Sutton and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Emmanuel Mosley, and, try and sort of stem the bleeding, really, from the fact that all these guys they brought in the draft didn't actually make the impact they thought they would have. So I think that's a question internally for them to go, well, are these guys actually talented playmakers and we're letting them down with the scheme, or have we simply not brought in the players we thought we were going to get, and therefore our defense isn't as good as it should be?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Like you said, injuries are a part of football. I get that. But like Levi Onwuzurike was a tough one, pretty much out of the gate, a back injury for, I thought, a really fun, promising second-round pick. Like, it's been a lot. So, I don't know. I think we're on the same page there. Like, it could be better. It started off great, but, it's tough right now. Also the offense the last couple of weeks has put them in a lot of tough positions. Obviously a ton of turnovers, things of that nature that haven't helped. The defense did step up and kind of seal the game against the Chicago at the end there. Like, they've been able to make some splash plays and make some, bend don't break type of plays over the course of the last couple of weeks. Obviously you want the underlying metrics to be strong as well, but I don't think they were maybe as good as they were in the beginning, like you said, and they're probably not as bad as the metrics say the last, 6 games.